So I'm Macy Levan. I'm the podcast person, social media person. I've been working with the journal for a long time. And Stefan and Tanjala, do you want to introduce yourselves?
I'm Stefan Tullius. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Transplantation journals.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tanjala Purnell. I'm the executive editor for diversity, equity, and inclusion of the Transplantation journals. And I apologize. There's all of a sudden there's noise in my background. So if while I'm speaking, please let me know if you hear it and then we can adjust.
Okay. I can't hear anything right now. You're good.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
So Nazia Selzner, I am a transplant hepatologist at Ajmera Transplant Center at University of Toronto in Canada. And, I am passionate about diversity, equity, inclusion. And along with Dr. Tsien, my colleague, who is here, we organized this DEI in Transplantation Congress 2 years ago. Last year, actually, not 2 years ago.
And my name is Cynthia Tsien. I'm a transplant hepatologist also at UHN Toronto General Hospital. I'm also the education director at the Ajmera Transplant Center, and I'm also a fellowship program director. So a lot of this is based on my experiences with patients, but also with trainees, which is why we felt a DEI and transplant conference was so needed.
Fantastic. Well, I'm just going to start reading and get along with what this will be a very natural conversation given everyone's experience and expertise here. Welcome to the Transplantation Journal podcast. I'm Dr. Macy Levan, and today we're exploring a paper and an event that brings together voices from around the world. We have clinicians, scientists, nurses, and patients that are really all working towards a more inclusive future in transplantation. And there's a paper that has accompanied this topic, and it's titled Global Strategies for Advancing Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Transplantation. It's insights from the Inaugural International Congress that was recently published in the journal. This international meeting has been held in Toronto, and it has examined how gender, race, mentorship, wellness, and access to transplantation all intersect, and how global collaboration can help close longstanding gaps in care and leadership. So joining me are our extraordinary voices. We've already introduced ourselves. We can use some of that. And I'd like to get started with asking about some global perspectives. So Nazia, this is an international congress that brought together transplant professionals and patient partners from every region of the world, which is an impressive feat. Congratulations. What motivated this kind of global conversation?
Yeah, thank you for this. I have been involved with the International Liver Transplant Society as the chair of their DEI committee back in 2017, 2018. And at that time, we sent a survey about the leadership of women in transplantation, in liver transplantation at that time. And, we sent a survey around the world, and we published actually that report in Transplantation. And really, the result was quite frightening in terms of the low rate of women, female leadership in transplantation, whether it's from the medical or surgical side. And, from after that, the next year, the same committee, we start looking at sending a survey to our members to asking some question related to, racial or gender discrimination that they were feeling at work, discrimination in terms of job promotion, mentorship, differences in compensation, so on and so forth. And again, when we looked at the result of that survey, which was just, ILTS membership, but because the society is an international society, we had again representation in our answers from around the world. And we published also that result, and that manuscript really raised a lot of concern. And similarly, we do see a lot of discrimination in terms of access to liver transplantation or to organ transplantation in general for our patient population. And all of these things really led us to think about bringing, from all around the world, leaders in transplantation to have a Congress that attacks really these issues, whether it's related to professionals or patient partners, and looking at these problems and try to solve them together. And again, the aim of this meeting was not to talk about a specific organs, but rather really topics that transplant professionals and transplant patients, whether they are donor, they are recipient, allied health coordinators, etc., face in terms of challenges. And hence that meeting. And then, this meeting was not attached to any specific professional societies, but we went and approached every single professional societies in transplantation to endorse the meeting and send us representative. And we were able to have, colleagues and patient partner joining us from all around the globe for that first Congress that was held last year in Toronto. That's how it started.
Wow, well, that's fantastic. And can you tell me a little bit about the atmosphere in Toronto? Like, did you feel a sense of shared purpose and kind of values from people all kind of coming together for the same reason?
Yes. So, when we started, we weren't quite sure actually how, our colleagues, especially other societies, would react to this meeting and whether they are willing to be involved or have their endorsement as a stamp for that meeting. And it was very interesting to upfront see an overwhelming sense of, yes, we want to part of it. Yes, we will send representative. We will nominate from our group's representative to come to your meeting and represent our society and our views. And it was quite really interesting for us. And subsequently, when the meeting took place, we had 2 days of people, colleagues, patients, partners joining us, and the overwhelming reactions and participation and engagement of whoever was at that meeting. We had about 200 people attended that first meeting. Was really fascinating. And I'm sure Cynthia has a lot to add from her side. We really weren't expecting that much positive reaction and feedback. And initially we thought we are going to do it every other year, but the feedback and the comments we received were so strong that by the end of the second day, actually, everyone wanted it to be repeated again this year, which is a complete different scenario. We can talk about that, but it just shows how people were engaged. They felt vulnerable to share their experiences. Not just their successes, but also the challenges that they face during their professional life, the negative experiences that they have. And really, I have never been to a meeting myself where really people felt so safe to engage and participate. And I'm going to let Cynthia now maybe give some of her impressions about the question you asked.
Yeah, I think that globally, we all recognize no matter where you are in the world, there are challenges for our patients to access transplantation, which is really terrible because it is a life-saving procedure in many cases. And I think what was really unique about our conference was that we finally acknowledged that if we want to help patients, we also have to help ourselves. We have to address, the inequities within the professional workplace. We have to address the fact that there isn't a lot of diversity amongst healthcare professionals who are providing care to these patients. And we have to address the burnout that we're seeing, particularly, since 2019, 2020. I think everyone is acknowledging the burnout that is happening amongst our colleagues, our trainees. And I think that was what was really incredible about our conference, as Nazia alluded to, was that people were willing to look at themselves and say, hey, what are the issues and the challenges with the healthcare professionals taking care of the patients? And that if we want to help other people, we have to help ourselves first. We have to make sure that there's more representation amongst trainees who are going to become our colleagues in order to improve patient experience. And I think that was what was really heartening and really uplifting, was the number of people who wanted to take on this work. There was a real sense of, there's so many challenges, but we all want to do this together and really make meaningful change. And I think we all left that meeting really felt so uplifted, energized. Sometimes there's a danger in people like looking at the negative and so much work there is to do. But I think people really felt energized that we were willing to talk about this, and that, as Nazia was saying, we had plans to continue this conversation with another conference the year afterwards.
That's fantastic insight. We'll get to that in a few minutes. That is one of the very last things I want to talk about. Is you just came back from the second Congress. So I want to move over to Stefan and sort of talk for a moment about the role of the Transplantation Journal and its leadership. And, you've often emphasized that, excellence in science does require fairness and representation. And so why was it important for Transplantation to feature this paper?
I think this paper is at the heart of our mission. I think if we look into global transplantation, the opportunities for patients to have equal opportunities to access transplantation is a critical piece of our mission. We are currently working on a summary of the global organ donation and transplantation report. And the data here really show that there are huge disparities in the opportunities to access transplantation. So we want, on the one hand, highlight those, provide opportunities and analysis to improve access. And as it already has been said, that can only be done by a community that on its own has an overall support and is equally supported and diverse to represent transplantation. So a podcast like this, a publication like this, a meeting like this is really something that we want to see in our journal. And we want to see and hear those voices who are representing those reports.
Right. That's really awesome, because I know inclusion strengthens not just the workforce, but it strengthens the data that we have and ultimately our outcomes.
Correct.
Yeah. So let's move on and talk now a little bit about building structures for change. And Tanjala, you and I have worked together for a long time, and you've really been a foundational international leader in examining health equity within health systems. From a public health infrastructure perspective, you're a global leader. What stood out to you in this paper and some of the discussions that it captures?
Well, first I'll say thank you for your very kind words, Macy. I certainly appreciate the acknowledgement of my work. And I'll start by saying one of the things that really stood out to me and gave me a sense of joy and optimism is really just thinking about how, although we know that many of these inequities are long-standing, it's always very refreshing to see younger trainees and others who are coming into the field and who are activated to want to really force structural changes. And so I love when I see, leaders who are coming together and bringing everyone together so that we can then think about, well, what is it that we as a society, what is it that we owe patients? What is it that we owe ourselves as a field? It's not just about trying to make accommodations for a few people or a small subset. We cannot realize our full potential in the field of transplantation unless we get rid of these longstanding inequities. And it's no longer okay to really think about it from an individual perspective. We cannot, put the full burden on individual patients. We cannot put the full burden on individual families or even individual clinicians and other transplant professionals. And so, what I really loved is the emphasis on structural and system changes and the recommendations starting right at the top, but also at every level, thinking about how can we be not only more supportive to patients, but also to our peers working in this field, right? We often talk about the importance of diversity in the workforce, diversity meaning a number of different characteristics, including gender, race, et cetera. And how are we doing that as a society? How are we doing that as a field? And so I love the very tangible recommendations. And also, some of the recommendations reminded me of my time as chair of our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee for the American Society of Transplant Surgeons. And one of the things that I'm most proud of is that we were able to help make changes to our society's bylaws to help set up a mentorship program and sponsorship program to set it up so that people could come in who may not have the same social support, may not have the same sponsorship opportunities within their individual institutions, can come in and get connected with a more senior leader within our society and really think about ways to get advancement up to positions of leadership and not just membership, right? So again, thinking about taking the burden off of just individual members and really thinking about these structural changes and what is really needed to drive long-term and sustainable changes in our field.
That's really fantastic insight. So how do you envision the next phase, right? We're aware, we know what's going on, we know we need to make change. So how do you get from awareness to like sustained impact?
I think that this conference is one example of doing that. Some of the lessons that we learn within one system or within one country or one local geographic area may help to inform change in other places. I think that one of the biggest things that we really have to focus on, right, is thinking about how do we translate things that have become effective at a smaller scale and a very local level. How do we scale up and how do we sustain these changes over time? We always have these cycles of progress. There are always going to be years where we see tremendous gains in the field. We see tremendous attention and emphasis on wanting to drive change. And then often that's followed by periods of, no longer focusing as much on trying to sustain those changes. So again, thinking about ways that even if we are in a period of no longer truly emphasizing equity per se, how do we not lose the advancements that were made during the period when we were making more of these investments? How do we embed many of these structural changes across so many different aspects of our system that no one move can wipe away all of our progress? And I think that's really, where we have to go. How do we embed these principles? How do we embed these changes into every facet of our society so that it's no longer seen as a subset of anything? It's just seen as general practice. It's seen as something that's expected and seen as something that's beneficial for everyone.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's an important shift to move from kind of like an afterthought or an extra thought to full inclusion and not being after or an extra, right? So
Yeah.
I want to move into another section that we kind of have already alluded to, this whole patient partnership, which I think is a big deal. One of the most powerful aspects of the paper to me was sort of the inclusion of patient partners, particularly in pediatric space, all the way to adult recipients and living donors. And so can you tell me, Nazia or Cynthia or both of you, why this was so essential to you to include?
Cynthia, do you want to start?
I can start, but I wanted to comment that, patients are at the heart of everything we do. But sometimes we're so busy, we start losing that aspect of seeing them, like really seeing them. And I think that what I've noticed in the last couple of years is this real emphasis on not just having patients as our partners in all aspects of like research, deciding what to do on a clinical aspect, but even like the language that we're using to speak to them. And I think one of the most interesting things that I saw, which I'm sure other people have already heard about, but that expression, no research without us. I'm paraphrasing it a little bit. I don't have the exact words, but the idea that we can't be doing things to patients without their full participation. And I think sometimes as busy clinicians, you have that clinic of like 18 people that you have to see, and you're looking at a screen, you're looking at a lot of numbers, and you don't really ask the patient, like, what do you want? What's your goal today? I know what my goal is. I want to know what the graft is doing. I want to know all these things, but I never ask the patient, like, what's your goal today? And I think it was so nice. It was so powerful to have patients and to have a space where we could sit down, we could truly, fully hear their stories, and to really just renew our commitment to, like, why do we do this? Like, why do we work so hard? We really put ourselves second. We really do feel a calling in medicine. I can't speak for other people, but I really felt like during this conference, it was just a reaffirmation of, the very powerful experiences that patients are having during this very life-changing process. This is, they describe it over and over again, a new life, rebirth, and to be able to hear their experiences, to be able to hear their challenges, and to walk a mile in their shoes. Their stories were so powerful, and I think it really re-energized me to understand, like, why we're doing this, why this work is so important.
And I think another important aspect to have always patient, even pediatric patient at the table and hearing the voice, is to understand really that their need is not also just one need. There are different background, there are different needs, even in the way we address them at time. We learn how to approach, for example, LGBTQ community patients, how to introduce ourselves, how to give them safe space that they understand that they can actually express themselves, bring up their needs to our attention. To be culturally sensitive, in countries like Canada, we have so many immigrants, so many plus our indigenous population. And at times we treat everyone the same way, And having those voices at the table allow us really to shift the way we approach the patients. And with their help, we can actually just make this journey more successful and allow them also to gain trust on us and not feel that, we treat everyone the same way, one shoes fit every size.
Yeah. It's certainly a reminder, right, that a goal isn't just fairness for professionals, but it's also for all of the patients that we serve. And it's timely care, fair care, access, all of those things are incredibly important. Stefan, do you have any comments on this that you'd like to add to the conversation?
I do. As the journal, our focus is frequently on data, on science, basic science, clinical science, and we frequently lose track of what the patient really wants, because that frequently goes beyond all those very specific data-driven assessments. It is difficult and challenging at times to find the data supported aspects of the patient's position in all of this. And it's even more important to have patients included into conferences like this. I think patients have a different view that we frequently don't recognize. We look into 1-year graft survival and patient survival. Patients look beyond that. For patients, quality of life is important. How am I doing with all the additional effects, side effects of immunosuppressants? That is a very important voice that we frequently and often miss and don't see. And so it is a fantastic reminder for us to have patients as part of this conference, to be in a partnership with providers and to hear from them, because that is really what should be driving us to achieve the best outcomes, and in the way that patients really are looking forward to their optimal outcome.
Yeah, I agree. Tanjala, any additional comments?
Sure. I echo everyone else's sentiments and wanted to also just put forth this reminder that patients or people living with these conditions are experts in their own right, and often we frame conversations around thinking that we as outsiders need to make the best decisions on behalf of others who have their own lived experiences and who have their own expertise and insights into what it's like living with these conditions and going through some of these barriers and many of the different challenges with our healthcare systems. And so I think that it's absolutely vital that we continue in this framework of, again, recognizing that not everyone who is living with any of these conditions, including being candidates for transplant, not everyone is in a position to where they are unable to understand very complicated medical terms or unable to communicate what it's like and the things that they would like for us to change as transplant professionals, or the things that our facilitators are helping to get through that process. And one of the things that I found even in my research is that often other patients and those who are in the beginning stages of trying to get through the transplant process love to hear from their peers. They love to hear from others who've gone through this process firsthand and often want to exchange contact information or ask their questions in a way, again, where they feel comfortable, where they feel like this is someone who may understand my hesitations or my concerns. And so, again, I love any opportunities that provide a platform for patients and people with lived experiences to share their stories and to share their expertise and to be recognized, right, for the important information that they're sharing with us that hopefully will help us to build better systems.
Thanks. Wonderful comments. I agree with all. Let's pivot now to what just happened this past weekend. I was not there, but I believe my guests were there. Now you've held the second official Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Congress in Transplantation, and that was just yesterday and the day before. So talk about translating conference energy into action the first time around. The paper is published and it's available to review, but can you talk a little bit with us about these mechanisms that are now in place to start carrying forward these discussions, the commitments and the opportunities presented at this meeting?
Yeah, so this year we try to shift a little bit the focus of the meeting from just, not knowing where the problems are, but trying to come with some practical routes or goals or implementation of policies, etc., that can help the momentum move globally. And we learn all from each other. For example, we heard from a very successful transplant program dedicated to Hispanic population in the US that is very unique. And in fact, many of our American colleagues were extremely interested to learn about that program. There were a lot of questions about how that program was initially created and successful was in Chicago, and how they can implement it in other centers in the US where there is a huge Hispanic population. We learn about the burnout of the coordinators, the coordinators that are dealing with for example, with the donors. And it was actually quite frightening to listen that this individual, they change their job every 2-3 years because of the amount of stress that they have, they are dealing with, and what system can be put in place in terms of someone presented the research on that, and how that problem can be tackled and solved. We learned from pediatric groups, for example, a very successful team in Toronto that is providing a peer-to-peer support for the pediatric patients, adolescents that don't want to come to the clinics, don't want to listen to parents, don't want to listen even less to the doctors, but are happy to talk to someone of their own age who had a transplant and share their experience and ongoing research in that area, and the success that they have, that they presented, that was overwhelmingly well received by people who were there at that meeting. So we were able to shift the pendulum from just talking about the problem, but also showing example of successes in implementing a solution for that problem in a specific area that can be translated and picked up and carry on and become a global solution. And I think that was very, very successful. And then we also had a lot of discussion about, the issues faced from diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in some areas in the world, and the threat that is happening, and how these other places can help solve or carry on the momentum in terms of DEI initiatives, while other countries may have a setback at the moment. I don't know, Cynthia, if you would like to add further thoughts or to it.
Yes, it was fantastic just to have everybody being able to be in one place in person together and really being able to collaborate, discuss these ideas. And like you said, you could tell that there were seeds being planted for, national and international collaborations. Some very, very successful people who've been doing great work in this space, who are able to, increase their reach by helping others replicate their successes. And I think that in the future, we obviously have very, very strong successes. And again, the question is, how do we just keep growing this and making it more systemic? As Tanjala, as you mentioned, we got to keep the conversation going, so that, again, it's not just one individual, one person who's able to change that small sector of their program, but really, how do you speak to administration? How do you really implement, all of these measures on a systems-wide level to really make that change stick? And as Nazia mentioned, more important than ever, given the current climate about DEI initiatives all over the world. So it was really nice to see people in person, hear their passion, and we had a lot of trainees, which was amazing. So we could hear how interested they were and how they were going to continue this work as well.
Amazing. Do you have plans for a Congress next year, 2026?
We are in discussion about. We just finished literally yesterday afternoon, so we have to and we hope that Transplantation is still interested to look at the report from this year. We will promise to get it done a lot faster, but we are thinking about how to make it perhaps more visible, because it still needs for more people to be aware of what like people that came the last 2 years. A lot of them came back. Some couldn't come back because of the issues that's happening. Particularly some of our US colleagues couldn't join this meeting, but we do hope that we can make it more visible. So we have some thoughts about, or we are going to have some thoughts about how to bring this a bit more to the forefront and to bigger attention.
And I think, what we really appreciate about this conference, as Nazia alluded to before, was the international support. So many societies really supported this. We appreciate the support from Transplantation, and I think that's what is making it successful. It was just astonishing. Medical, surgical, all different organ groups, societies, all these professional societies really supported the conference.
That's incredible. So to me, this work really reminds us that inclusion is not a parallel goal. It's really a central goal. It's what I'm hearing from all of you, to our progress in science, to our ethical leadership, but really most importantly, to the trust of our patients that depend on us every day. So many, many thanks to this wonderful group, Dr. Nazia Selzner, Dr. Tanjala Purnell, Dr. Stefan Tullius, and Dr. Cynthia Tsien. Thank you today for joining me and for helping us to define what a fair and connected global transplant community can look like. You can read the full article, Global Strategies for Advancing Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in Transplantation, Insights from the Inaugural International Congress in Transplantation now. Thank you all very much. Appreciate your time, and we'll wrap.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.